Welcome to Don't Chuck It Up, the podcast where we help students and families navigate the wild journey of the college search and applying to colleges without breaking a sweat. I'm your host, Chuck, and today we're talking about the first semester of college. Now, often on this podcast, I help students and families navigate the process to get to college, but I think it's also important that we talk about what happens once you get to college and you start your first semester. So I wanted to bring on a guest to help me talk about this topic, someone who has been in this business and has known this topic for a very long time. My guest today is Ricardo Ortegon. He is an independent educational consultant and former VP of enrollment and also the former director of academic advising. So Ricardo, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Chuck. I'm very pleased to be here and appreciate this opportunity to chat.
Yeah, excited to have you because you've really been in this space of both being an independent educational consultant as well as working on college campuses for quite some time. So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell my listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself?
Okay, sure. So as much as I don't like to admit this, I've been working in higher education for over 30 years. So I've started off as a college recruiter, and moved up and had different roles, including enrollment management. I've overseen undergraduate and graduate admissions, but one of my most rewarding roles, I guess I would say, would be student success. So I was, as you mentioned, director of academic advising for many years, and then about 5 years ago, decided to open my own business. And one of the things that I say to myself and to my students and families that I work with is that what I want to do is bring my 30 years of experience, everything that I always say I wish I knew back then, and share that with my students and families. So I've been started my own business which is GPS College Guidance. Been doing it now for 4 or 5 years.
Awesome. Absolutely. And just like you, I agree. I worked in higher ed and in other parts of the higher ed world. And I think bringing all of that information to students and families is really helpful, and especially doing academic advising. Again, a lot of students and families are really focused on what college fits them best, but then once they get there, they don't really understand how to utilize that college experience best so they can graduate in 4 years on time and with little debt. So let's talk about that a little bit. What are the very first steps that a new college student should take once they begin that first semester? What are your recommendations?
Sure. So let me also add, as I mentioned, right, I opened my own business 4 or 5 years ago, doing college consulting. But one of the other services that I also offer is called what I call the College Navigator program, where I work with students who are exactly what we're talking about, starting into college and helping them have a successful, career in college. Because as you mentioned, time is money, right? But to go directly to your question about, what is the advice that I give students and things that they should be doing from the very first semester includes, and I say this lovingly, but I always tell students that, your BFF in college really should be your academic advisor, because that's going to be your key for staying on track, figuring out what needs to be completed, and all those kind of things. So, that's the first thing I always say, make sure you make that connection with your academic advisor. This is somebody that you're going to be meeting with every semester throughout your career in college, and that's what you should be planning. The other things that are really, really important is for students to start realizing what resources are available on campus to help them succeed, right? Some of the most important offices that I strongly encourage students to meet with in the very first semester is, I've already mentioned academic advising, so that's one of them, but tutoring, right? And I tell students, from day one, start going to tutorings, getting into the habit of going to tutoring. I do say, that sometimes, one of the things that I say is that tutoring is free. And I say that in air quotes because it's really part of the fees that they're paying.
Absolutely.
Right. But what I tell students is, start going to tutoring from the very beginning. If you feel like, mid-semester, you have a, strong A, and you really don't need the tutoring, then you can wean off of the tutoring. But it's really, really difficult for you to, if you start off with a D or an F, it's kind of difficult to build that up. So I always tell students, plan on doing tutoring from the beginning. You can wean off of it if you don't need it. The other thing that it's also really important is for students to get involved. So, I think it's, really, really important for them to make friends and start networking. And so I strongly encourage them to, and I know most colleges and universities have some type of student organization or club fair, every semester. So I tell students, go explore, visit, figure out what, sparks your interest. And I also tell students, pick two or three clubs that you may want to consider. And then I advise them to, go to at least one of their meetings. It may not be your cup of tea, but the only way to find out is by, going to one of these meetings, getting involved and making some friends. So these are some of the main things that I advise students to do from the very get-go.
Yeah, I really agree that, joining a student organization of any sort, it could be something that students did in high school and continuing on that interest in college, or going to something fresh. A lot of colleges and universities have clubs and organizations that are wildly different than high school. It's a great way to explore other areas. I also agree, having been a graduate student who worked in academic success and tutoring and those types of resources, students do not utilize the free, and I agree with you, air quote free, tutoring, supplemental instruction, and other academic tutoring services, getting your papers, reviewed before you send them in, or going to a tutoring session for a class that might be a new subject area for you. And your first point, absolutely, academic advising is the key to being able to graduating on time and making sure that you're getting everything done to complete your degree. A lot of students ask me how I completed 2 bachelor's degrees. It was academic advising. And for parents listening, academic advising really starts during the summer before a student arrives on the college campus. They usually get connected to their academic advisor over the summer, but then students need to meet with them. They have to meet with them at least once a semester. I tell students all the time, go in more often so that you really make sure, okay, if you're changing majors or adding a minor or planning a study abroad, you're meeting with your academic advisor to make sure that it all fits and you can hopefully graduate on time, which is in 4 years. So why is it so important for them to really start those meetings that early? Because we say meet with your academic advisor within the first 2 weeks of college.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me add on the other thing that I also advise students, and again, as I mentioned, right, I spent many years working in academic advising, so I'm speaking from experience. But what I also tell students is meet with your academic advisor way before registration even begins, because this is when, and for the most part, most academic advisors I know love meeting with students, right? So if they can meet with them way before the registration window opens, or several weeks before that starts, then they have the time to really sit with you and talk about what your goals are and what kind of courses you want to take. And so they've got the time to meet with you. Students who wait to meet with their advisor in the middle of registration, you know, you know how that goes, right? They're trying to get to them as quickly as possible and get them. So I always say, words of wisdom, try to meet with them way before their crunch time, and then they're going to give you the time, that you need to plan it out. But the reason that is, it's really, really important is for, as you mentioned, right, for the very first semester, let's plan out your academic roadmap. What kind of courses are you going to be taking? Some of the things that the academic advisors are going to help students is, figure out, the prerequisites or courses that are offered once a year, right? So, and this is really, really important for students to stay on track. So, and what I mean by that is, for example, there's going to be some courses out there that have prerequisites. In other words, you got to take this course before you can take this course, right? And if some of these courses, for example, are only offered in the fall, right? And so if you miss that course, that means you're 2 years behind, right? You've got to wait for the next year to take that fall course, which was a prerequisite for the other course that you needed to take. So, those are things that are really important. The other thing is, I tell students, make sure that you bring your transcripts. If you did any dual enrollment, print out the syllabus from the course that you took, and bring all of this information to your advisor so that they can look at all the courses that you've taken, whether it's AP credits, IB credits, dual enrollment courses, right? And make sure that you get all of those credits applied to your record.
Yeah, I really think that that's something that when I was doing some academic advising at previous institutions, students miss this step early on in the college process where they're at a college and they didn't make sure that their dual enrollment classes or their post-secondary enrollment option or some of whatever it might be called at your particular school, as well as their AP, IB, and other exams, CLEP exams that they've taken, they need to get those really in front of their academic advisor early so that they're not scrambling, say, senior year of college, trying to figure out how to make all the credits work. So what do you think is, the process for that, and how can students really get the maximum credit for those AP, IB, and other dual enrollment classes?
Yeah, no, great question. So, and what I tell students is that you really have to be your own advocate, right? So one of the things that I tell students is you got to do a little bit of research yourself, right? And what I mean by that is, for example, figure out what the college's credit policy is. Most colleges and universities will post on there saying that if you took this AP course and earned a 3 or 4 or 5, here's the academic credits that we're giving you. So I tell students, go in there and figure out what their credit policies are. Meet with your academic advisor again, right? And bring all that information into your meeting with your academic advisor. Again, transcripts, course syllabi, anything that's going to help them determine what is articulations for some of the courses and credits that you've taken. The other thing that I also tell students is, because sometimes, right, though, colleges and universities will bring in a course, but they haven't really articulated it yet, so it's falling pre-electives area. And again, this is why I tell students, you got to do your due diligence, right? Because one of the things, and I know we talked about this before, but one of the things is that sometimes courses have different titles, right?
Yes.
But they fulfill what we call the spirit of the requirement, right? So I tell students, I go and look into your degree audit, right, to see what transfer credits came in. If any of those credits came in as free electives, right, look at what that course covered, and look at what your outstanding requirements are and see if that course may meet the spirit of the requirement, right? And again, the best way to prove that is having your syllabus, may need to be reviewed by the department that's offering the course. But as long as you have all your ducks in a row, you should be able to maximize the number of credits that you get.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ricardo, you were talking about the degree audit or the academic record. For families who might not be aware, is that once a student is at a college, they can log into their profile, their website, where they can see what courses they've taken, what they've registered for. And there's a thing called a degree audit, which literally says, okay, you are in this degree, whether that's Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Business Administration, whatever it may be, and you are in this major or pre-major, and it'll say, for this, you need to complete all of these classes, both for the major and the general education requirements. And that degree audit will say, this has already been satisfied, and you can basically see all of the boxes you need to check in order to graduate. For those dual enrollment classes, one thing that students and families may not realize is that that class has to have an official transcript being sent to the registrar of your college, and the registrar basically has to approve it and says, yep, this is a similar class to what we take, so we are transferring that credit through the registrar. Then it goes on to your degree audit. And Ricardo, as you mentioned, it could be put in as an elective, but you might need that as something else. So you may need to talk to your academic advisor or to the registrar's office to see if you can move that from column whatever elective to column whatever required class. So yeah, that's critical information. Again, students typically wait to not look at their degree audit until like junior or senior year of college. And by that time, it's usually too late.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing to keep in mind, for that, Chuck, is that most times, right, when students are applying for admission, they're just indicating on their Common App with whatever application that they did some dual enrollment, but some schools don't really require that official transcript. And again,
True.
This is the admissions role.
Yep.
Right. If they want to get academic credit for that, as you said, they've got to submit an official transcript from the college or university. And then it's, and again, follow due diligence and make sure that, that course got applied to where you feel it needs to be applied. Right.
Yeah.
And meeting with an advisor is critical for that.
And an official transcript is really a transcript that moves from one institution directly to the other institution. So it can't be handed to a student and then the student goes and walks it over paper form. That's considered an unofficial because it's now touched the student and the student could have altered it. So an official transcript is really being transferred from one college or university, typically email sent or electronic download, directly to the college that you want it to be transferred to. So I put that out there because when I was a former transfer counselor, students would walk in with their transcripts in paper form. And I'm like, dude, I can't take that because you could have gone into Photoshop and totally changed this. And so I don't know. So I need to get it directly from the college. And students were like, oh yeah, people do that. I'm like, oh yeah, there's many high profile cases out there of people altering their transcripts. So that's very much a thing. Um, I think another thing that you and I have talked about before is this really strong interest in students doing study abroad, which I love. I went on study abroad. I think it was a great experience, but it's trying to fit sometimes a square peg into a round hole. So what are your recommendations for students and families who are interested in doing study abroad while they're in college?
No, that's a great question. And I'm not just like you, Chuck. I also did a study abroad and was one of the best experiences I had in college. So I'm always advocating for study abroad. And I'm always telling students, it's really, really important for you from the very first semester to learn everything about study abroad. Like I said, I have several students that are doing my college navigator program, and I've heard them say, "Oh no, my friend said it was too expensive, or I'm not going to be able to afford it." And I say, "No, don't. You got to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. Go to the study abroad office, figure out what type of opportunities are available out there. A lot of these programs will offer scholarships, right, and things like that. But I
Yep.
think, what's really, really important, the things that I think are key for a student to know is one is, can I afford to go? Right? And you're not going to know until you meet with an advisor in the study abroad office to figure that out. Again, there's scholarships. Sometimes you can use your financial aid, can move with you to study abroad, right? There's a lot of ways for you to be able to finance it. The other thing that's really, really important is to learn early on what type of study abroad programs are available for, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
study abroad all over the world, right? Maybe you want to go study somewhere because you know the language, or maybe you want to go study somewhere because you want to learn a little more about the culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a lot of different areas around the world, and for you to explore what kind of opportunities are available there. The other thing that's really, really important is what type of academic credit are students going to get for
Yeah.
these broad programs. And one of the things that I experienced was my role in academic advising is sometimes students would come to me like their junior year or rising seniors that they wanted to do study abroad. And then when we talk about the type of academic credits that they can earn, they've already taken courses to fulfill those academic credits,
Yeah.
right? So that's it's important from the very first semester to try to figure out what study abroad programs you're interested in and what type of academic credits you're going to be earning through this type of study abroad programs so that you don't duplicate by taking those courses on campus, right? So
Yes.
that you learn early on and map it out, right? Some of these study abroad programs are a semester. Sometimes they're a couple of weeks in the winter break. Sometimes they
Mm-hmm.
could be in the fall, right? But again, you've got to map it out and plan it out. Where in your degree are you going to be doing study abroad? There are some students out there that actually do two study abroads, right? So if you
Yeah.
plan and plan it carefully, you can actually, do two study abroads. But again, the importance of meeting with the office from the first semester, figuring out what programs are available and what kind of financing or resources are available to pay for it. What type of academic credits are you going to earn? And then you can start planning, and also the timeline, right?
Yes.
Some schools require that you can only do it as a sophomore and above, right? So sometimes they say you have to be a junior. So you got to figure out the timeline and how is that going to fit into your courses that you're taking while you're on campus.
Yeah, those are all great points, and the biggest thing is starting early. I think some students just go, "Oh, I just applied the semester before I want to go." And that might be true for a small handful of programs, but many programs you have to start that process almost a year in advance, sometimes even farther, because you'd also make sure that do you have your passport, do you have your immunizations, do you need a visa? There are other government documents that have to happen to make sure that you can do those things. And as you said, meeting with academic advising to make sure it fits, so you're not duplicating classes, talking to the financial aid office to see how your financial aid package will connect to study abroad. And many colleges do allow for you to transfer your financial aid scholarships and need-based aid to help you do your study abroad program. I think also that most parents are used to hearing about semester study abroad, and there are those winter break, spring break, summer break, shorter study abroad programs, which are really still awesome and amazing. And it might be less time. A lot of students are freaked out about spending a whole semester in another country or sometimes a whole year. The shorter break programs can give them a taste of another country without committing for a full 15, 16 weeks and being over there. I mean, my program was a 20-week program, so I was there for quite some time. I loved it, but some students probably would go, "Oh my gosh, 20 weeks in another country, that's a long time." So yeah, those are all great thoughts about study abroad. Um,
Yeah. And the other thing that I'll add to that, Chuck, is that in addition to it being a wonderful experience, right, of being exposed to different culture and different people and everything else, the other thing also is that the enhancement it does for your resume, right?
Yes.
If there's, for example, are going to, uh, continue on to grad school, right? Or they want to get a job, right? To be able to sit at an interview and talk about your experience, living and studying in a different country and learning about the culture and their customs. And, I think there's just so many pluses for taking advantage of study abroad programs.
Yeah, and I even did a short internship while I was on my study abroad program. I was an intern in an English-speaking school, so I went to a Spanish-speaking program, but I was an intern in an English-speaking school learning how they taught English to adults in that country, and I got to do a small internship there, which is a whole lot of fun. It was a great blast to try and see adults who were wanting to come study in the United States. It was kind of the reverse. They were learning English to come and be able to study and travel in the United States, and I got to do an internship with them, so that was an absolute blast. But yeah, I think the critical part is that study abroad is a way to make you stand out for career and for future job. And again, students wait too long before they start interacting with career services. They're like, oh, I don't have to worry about that until I'm a senior in college. So why do you think that students need to start interacting with career services earlier in their college experience?
Yeah, no, I think there's several, important points about meeting with career services from the beginning. One is, I tell students, you really should start building up your resume. Most students probably already had, some type of resume draft before they started college, but it's important for them to build on it, right? And start building their professional network through that. So some of the things that, the Career Services Office is going to help students from the very first semester. And again, as you mentioned, Chuck, a lot of students say they're going to wait till it's close to graduation before they start meeting with career services. And sometimes it's a little too late, right? But some of the great stuff that you can get out of visiting with career services is one, the resume, right?
Yep.
Have them help you build out your resume, and particularly, for example, if students are majoring in different types of careers, right? So you've got to tailor your resume depending on the career that you're choosing. For example, I'm working with students that are in hospitality, right? And I know that's a totally different industry. And so I said, I'm not an expert in hospitality, but the career services office in your school of hospitality, they are experts. So make sure you meet with them and have them review your resume and everything else. The other thing also is that they'll help you, build out your LinkedIn profile, which again, right now I think is really, really important. I know that anytime when I was, going through interviews and hiring people for my team, the first thing I would look at is let me look at their LinkedIn profile and see what they have out there. So I think, that's really, really important for them to have a really well-developed LinkedIn profile, and career services can help with that. The other thing is that most colleges and universities now are using some platform called Handshake. And so this Handshake is kind of like LinkedIn, but not really, right? But this is where schools will post any type of on-campus or off-campus jobs that they're advertising, right? They'll also post in their internships that are available for their students. They also will post in any workshops that they're providing for students. So I think it's really important. And like I said, most colleges and universities, are using the platform, that Handshake platform for that. So I strongly encourage students to do that. But the other thing that's also really important is, again, going back to internships, which is another big thing that I tell students that you really, really, you know, I advise students you should graduate with at least one internship under your belt, but if you can graduate with two or three, even better, right? And again, this also goes back to that importance of meeting from your very first semester, so you can see what are internships all about. And what I mean by that is kind of like study abroad. Internships also give academic credit, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important for you to realize what type of academic credits am I going to get from the different type of internship programs. The other things to learn, and again, very similar to study abroad, is what are the timelines for internships? When can I apply for an internship? What is the policy for the university? Uh, does the university help me get an internship, or do I have to get it on my own? And if I get it on my own, how am I going to be able to get academic credit for that, right? So these are all these questions that are really, really important for students to know from the very first semester, about internships. And the other thing that I tell students, that the importance of meeting also regularly with your career advisor, right? Let them get to know you, right? If they've worked on your resume and you've met with
Yep.
them a couple of times and they know what your interests are, what I tell students is you're going to be on top of mind. And what I
Yep.
mean by that is the minute that career advisor gets an internship across their desk, they're going to say, oh, I remember I met with Chuck and Chuck was interested in this. So let me forward that opportunity over to Chuck to see if he's interested in that. So again, meet with them, early on. Take advantage of the resources and the workshops that they offer. They're going to offer a workshop on resume writing, on interview skills, on putting together your elevator pitch,
Hmm.
right? So all these things that you need from your very first semester, because one of the things that I think is really important with regards to having a good resume in place is you're going to need that for your internships, right? And so it's okay. And so you're like, what's the phrase I'm trying to say? Killing a lot of birds with one stone, right?
Yep.
You're
Yep.
meeting with your advisor, you're getting your resume done, you're polishing up your skills for interviewing and all those things that are going to be so important for you to get a career. And again, I strongly encourage students try to get at least one internship under your belt. But if you could get more than one, that's even better. And the other plus that I'll talk about doing internships, and Chuck, I'm sure you know about this, uh, but I tell students that, you're doing internships to realize whether you really like the career or maybe you're doing it to realize I don't like this career, right?
Absolutely.
And the sooner you can realize that, the better, right?
Mhm.
But I know that I've seen a lot of students who, for example, not a lot of students, but I've seen students, for example, that are majored in accounting, right? They think accounting is what they want to do. And then they do an internship and they work at an accounting firm and realize, you know what, crunchy numbers is not what I want to do for the rest of my career. So again, internships are good to, formalize or to confirm what your interests are and what your career is or career path is going to be. Or they can also have you help you eliminate some of the things that you don't want to do. So internships are really, really valuable and important.
Yeah, and I think all of those points are great about why to connect with career early so that you can find those internships, build your resume, get your skills. The other key fact that a lot of students and parents don't realize is that a lot of alumni from that university go back to the career services area to try and find future employees. So one of the things that I do, even for my own alma mater, is I go back and meet with career and say, okay, are there students that are interested in working in higher education and what do they want to do? And I'm happy to sit down and meet with them for coffee or for lunch and talk to them. And I have many friends in the alumni world who are, shall I say, really powerful and important people, CEOs, presidents, who are like, yeah, when I'm back on the college campus, I go to the career services and they usually set it up ahead of time before they arrive and say, I'm going to be in career services from this time to this time, come by and see me. And I am shocked as to how many students do not take advantage of that opportunity. Here is an alum, maybe from a company you've never heard of, but they're usually an important alum. They're coming back to the university probably because they're going to be donating some money. And this person is saying, hey, I want to hang out and talk about my life and what I do. You're not going to know about that unless you're connected to career services. And what a great way to network. And of course, as you said, have your LinkedIn profile already so you can make that LinkedIn connection and build your network on LinkedIn. But yeah, so many students and parents just don't realize that the career services area is really one of the key offices for a student to be successful in life after college.
Yeah, yeah, Chuck. And the other point that I'll make, I mean, you make an excellent point about taking advantage of the alumni network, right? But like some of these colleges, universities, what they also offer, you know how we're always advising students or encouraging students to do an informational interview about a career,
Yep.
try to find somebody who's doing something that you're doing. A lot of these colleges and universities have that alumni network already set in place so that if students want to reach out to an alum, and do that informational interview on, what's a day like in your career and what are the ins and outs? This is a great opportunity. And so that's another great resource for students to try to figure out what they want to do in their careers.
Yeah. Another key thing that I'm noticing with students nowadays is that they're struggling to figure out a one major or one thing that they want to focus on. So I'm seeing a lot of students that are interested in either double majoring or majoring and minoring. From your experience doing academic advising, what are things that students need to keep in mind if they're thinking of doing a double major or a major and a minor?
Yeah, another great question and a really important one, right? Because, and I guess the theme of our podcast today is planning ahead, right? But again, this goes hand in hand with, the importance of planning ahead because if students are interested in different majors, right? And I sometimes I encourage students, try to get if you're going to do a double major or if you're going to do a major and a minor, try to do it from a different school within the university, right? So you can get,
Hmm.
exposure to different type of careers and majors. But again, it's really important for them to early on try to figure that out, whether they want to do a double major or whether they want to add a minor. Because the important thing of it is, I tell students, all this is possible and you can do it within the 4 years and
Hmm.
120 credits that are required if you plan well, right? So, and again, it goes back to the thing that we said at the beginning, the importance of meeting with your academic advisor, because these individuals know the ins and outs, right?
Yes.
These are the requirements for this major, these are the requirements for this major. Here's where some of the courses overlap, right? And I know, Chuck, you and I last time talked about double dipping,
Yep.
which is a thing that I use a lot in academic advising. And what we mean by double dipping is that you can take one course that will fulfill, for example, the requirements for two different majors, right? So you're killing two birds with one stone. You're not going to get double credit, right? But
Right.
you're going to take that
Right.
one course that would apply, to both two majors or maybe a major and a minor, right? And so, and the thing that does, the beauty of that is that, again, I said you're not going to get duplicate credits, but it opens you up for you to maybe take another course that you
Yes.
interests you. Taking this one course that fulfilled, the major requirements for two different majors, and now it opens up for you to take another course that you may enjoy yourself, right? So, really, really important to do that. And the other thing that's important, I know we talked about, learning the sequencing, right? If you're going to be doing two majors, right? Again, the importance of knowing what courses are being offered in what semester,
Hmm.
which courses require prerequisites, so you can, try to do that all, within those 4 years. So I think, that's really, really important. The other thing that my rule of thumb, right, or the advice that I give students, because sometimes I do get students that came to me right when they're rising seniors and saying, I want to add another major to my degree, or I want to add a minor to my degree. My personal rule of thumb was that if adding another major or adding a minor is going to add more than one semester to your undergraduate degree, I would advise students to think twice about that. And the reason I say that is because, for example, let's say you come late in the game and you say, I want to add another major, and it means that you're going to have to do two more semesters to be able to graduate with your undergraduate degree. Most master's programs are 4 semesters, right?
Right.
So by extending it for 1 year, what you could have done is, let me just get into the master's program and do 4 semesters of that and complete it, as opposed to doing two extra semesters of getting an undergraduate double major, right? So again, what I tell students that if it's going to be extended 1 semester, yeah, you can think about it, right? It could enhance, but if it's going to do it beyond, if it's going to take you a year or more to add that double major or that minor, think about it twice, and also to really think about what is your career path and what are your plans for graduate school. So, for example, going back to if you're planning to get a master's, it doesn't make any sense for you to extend your undergraduate degree to 2 semesters, right? If your plans are to go into grad school, and if
Right.
are able to go into grad school just with that one undergraduate degree, 'cause I guess it's a no-brainer for that, right? So again, it's depending on what your career goes. Let's say you have a career that you feel, what, having this double major is really, really going to enhance, the job that I want to get and the career that I need. So I'm going to go ahead and add on that double major, even if it means 2 more semesters, right? So again,
Hmm.
depending on your path, depending on your goals of graduate school, will help you determine, whether a double major or adding a minor is something that's going to
Yeah.
enhance you.
It really does depend on the career. So I mean, for me, I completed 2 degrees. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree and a Bachelor of Music degree, but I did that because of double dipping. I did that because I was able to make things line up. It did take me 5 years, but I literally graduated across the graduation stage twice because I had 2 completely different degrees from 2 different colleges. So that was kind of cool. But that was my hope, and I went into college thinking that. So that is not a norm. But I agree with you that if students are like, well, because a lot of times what happens is in junior year, students discover a new academic area and they go, oh, I'm going to add another major or add another minor. Is it beneficial to stay there? Or is it better to, as you said, plan on just going to get a master's in that area? That's where you need to talk to both academic advising and career services, because some students are unfortunately overeducated. And that's another reason that it makes it hard for them to get a job. They now have a bachelor's and 2 master's degrees because they did those things, and now they're not getting a job because they have so much education but no experience. So make sure you're talking with academic advising and career services. Um, one kind of
One
final,
more thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just one more thing that I would add to that, because I don't think I've mentioned it to our whole conversation, is also the importance of meeting with faculty, with the
Yes.
professors, right? Particularly, what you were speaking about of, they're a wealth of information, right? And they've been in the career, they've been in the industry, so they're also a great resource to, help you plan for grad school, or maybe help you plan for an internship, or help you plan for, what your first job is going to be. So, and faculty have these office hours that are available for
Mhm.
students to come in and just meet with them, pick their brain, learn as much as they possibly can. So that's one of the other things that I strongly encourage students to get to know your professors, go to their office hours and meet them there.
Yeah. No, you're
So,
right. So many of my friends who are faculty say, no one stops by during office hours. I just sit there and, now faculty have other stuff they can be doing. They're not sitting there twiddling their thumbs. But, the faculty are going, hey, I've blocked this off on my calendar as a time for students to stop by. I think there's, and I get this, a little bit of an intimidation factor of students going, oh, I'm going in to talk to a professor. That's what they're having the office hours for. So utilize them. You could even, just show up and just say hello. You don't have to go in with an actual question. The first time just might be a pure introduction, like, hey, I'm so and so, I'm in this class with you, or whatever it may be. But it's also a great time to go with questions about homework or concerns about career and life beyond college and what you're going to do. But faculty do like doing it, but students need to get over the fear that it's scary to go talk to faculty. Sure, they have PhDs, but it just means they've been sitting in college for a long time. They're not super scary.
right, right. And then the other thing also, I guess I'll throw this in as well, is the importance of building these relationships with professors, because you may need them for letters of recommendation for grad school,
Yes.
right? Also, they also are a wealth of information with internships and job opportunities for students. So they do bring a lot to the table.
Yeah, their former students or who enjoyed having them as a professor are reaching back and saying, hey, I'm now in this career. I'm looking for students. So sometimes job opportunities come through the career services office. Sometimes it comes through faculty, depending upon what type of job it is. I wanted to, spend some time. We're running out of time here, but I wanted to hear what are some big common mistakes that you think first year students make. I want to hear, like, what are the things that you wish you could just, say, hey, don't do these mistakes. And then we'll give you a moment to give your soapbox and share your best piece of advice for everybody as well. So first, let's start off with what are some quick common mistakes that students make?
Yeah, so well, I guess what I'm going to talk about, the most common mistakes are kind of like some of the things that we've talked about, right? But I think some of the most common mistakes is not meeting with your academic advisor. And again, I'll go back to, I always tell one that it should be your BFF, right? You really should get to know them. They need to get to know you. This is what I uh, again, from my background in academic advising, I said, this is the one individual in the college that you should be meeting with every semester. And as you said, more than once per semester is even better, right? And
Mm-hmm.
as I said before, try to meet with them way before the registration window opens up, so that they have the time of day to be able to give you the time that you need for any questions you may have. The other thing that I feel is some students wait a little bit to get involved with clubs and organizations and network and meet friends. And, when I talk to students, I also teach a new student seminar course. And, one of the things that I talk to students is to be expecting this roller coaster of emotions, right? When they get to school, right, at the first few weeks, everything's new. They're, meeting some new people. They're excited. So they're happy, right? And then in a couple of weeks, right, especially students that move far away from home, you start getting homesick and you're missing your mom's cooking. And so you go through these emotional roller coaster, as I call it, right? So, the other thing I tell students, that there's counseling services available for students. So if you're going
Mm-hmm.
through those, down times, you know, please know that there's a lot of resources on campus to help and support students that are going through these things. So, you know, that's another resource we didn't talk about, but it's an important one for students. The other thing is that sometimes students, they felt like they had it kind of easy in high school, so they overload with courses in college in their first semester. And sometimes,
Yes.
that first semester shock hits them where they aren't doing as well as they were doing in high school, and they realize that they need to do a little more studying than they did in high school. So, I always tell students, don't overload your first semester. Figure out what you can handle, right? Maybe your next semester, if you want to, add in an extra course, you can do that, but at least use your first semester to gauge yourself on, how well you can do and how much you can handle, right? And the importance of having a balanced life, right? It's not just academics, right? But you've got to also, think about your well-being and, hit the gym and do all other social activities and stuff like that to balance it out. Uh, be mindful of the course sequencing. I think it's really, really important to learn when courses are being offered and which courses are going to require prerequisites. And again, I feel like another big mistake is that students wait a little too long, right, to get involved with the career services or with study abroad and learning about all these great opportunities that students have for them.
Those are all great common mistakes. That was a quick, great laundry list of things that students and families need to keep in mind. I couldn't agree more with what you have shared there. I want to also just chime in with the whole course thing. I went to a high school where we took 8 classes a semester. We had short periods and took 8 classes. And so I was shocked when I went to college and we only had, the college I went to was academically fast-paced. So we only were taking 3 or 4 classes a semester. And I said, I'm going from 8 to 4? Like, that can't be right. Oh, was I in for it? I was shocked that 4 classes in college was definitely more work than my 8 classes in high school. So that is a big academic shift that most students and parents don't even think about. It's like, okay, my kid's used to taking all of these classes in high school, but then in college, it's less classes, but it's a whole lot more work.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, Ricardo, it is that time of the show where I give you an opportunity to kind of stand on your soapbox. So this is a chance for you to share your, biggest piece of advice and wisdom. If students and families were to take one thing away from this conversation, or maybe 2, what would you want to stand up on your soapbox and share with students and families who are listening right now?
Okay. Well, Chuck, let me also say, thank you for the opportunity to share this information with your audience. And as I said at the beginning, right, one of the things I'll say is that, when I started my business of GPS college guidance, one of the things that I went into it thinking was I want to be able to share everything that I wish I knew back then that I know now, right, with my students and families. But one of the things that I tell to students and families, right, as they're doing the college search and figuring out what college or university they want to attend, what I tell students and families is that it's not the college that you attend, but what you do when you're in college, right? And I'm a strong, strong believer in that students get out of college what they put into it, right? So if a student goes in there well prepared, figure out what are all the resources and all the opportunities that are available, internships, study abroad, meeting with professors, joining clubs, getting leadership roles, that's what's going to make a good experience for a student. So it's not the school that they attend, but what they do when they're in school. And I think that's, I guess, will be my parting message about make the best of it when you get to college.
I think that's absolutely excellent advice. It's been wonderful chatting with you, Ricardo, from GPS College Guidance. And his website is gpscollegeguidance.org. That information will be in the show notes as well. And you can also follow him on Instagram and on Facebook. So thank you, Ricardo, for being here today.
Thank you very much, Chuck. I appreciate it.
Once again, we've been chatting with Ricardo Ortegon from GPS College Guidance. We really appreciate having you on the show, Ricardo. I learned so much. I think we've shared a ton of information. Students and families may have to actually listen to this episode more than once to make sure that they get all of that information. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, comment on it, and see if there's anything that you want Ricardo and I to talk about in a future episode. And of course, share it with your friends. Let's get this information out there. We really appreciate it. Ricardo and I both have a passion for making sure that we're helping as many students and families as possible. So share the love and get this information out to other people in your social network. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today, but fear not, we will be back next week with more tips and tricks to help you conquer the college application process like a boss. Until then, remember, don't chuck it up.